January 20th, 1944. Camp Forest, Tennessee. Snow dusts the parade grounds as 1,100 men stand at attention, their breath forming clouds in the frigid morning air. Among them are artists from Pratt Institute and Cooper Union, advertising executives from Madison Avenue, and engineers from Bell Labs. Fashion designer Bill Blass adjusts his ill-fitting uniform, while future art icon Ellsworth Kelly stamps his feet against the cold. These men have been recruited for an unprecedented mission in the history of warfare. Not to destroy, but to deceive. Not to attack, but to perform the greatest illusion ever staged on a battlefield. Colonel Harry L. Reeder, a career Army officer with piercing blue eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, addresses his newly activated unit. What he tells them defies every conventional military doctrine they've learned in basic training. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops will wage war not with bullets and bombs, but with rubber, paint, speakers, and pure imagination. Their weapons will be inflatable tanks, sound effects records, and radio scripts. Their battlefield will be the enemy's mind. What unfolds over the next 16 months will save approximately 30,000 American lives through 22 major deception operations across France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany. From the hedgerows of Normandy to the banks of the Rhine, these combat con artists will repeatedly fool the Wehrmacht into believing they face forces 30 times larger than reality, demonstrating how creativity and cunning can triumph over superior numbers and firepower. The origins of this extraordinary unit trace back to a converted townhouse in London's Mayfair district, where American military planners studied every detail of British deception operations. The British had pioneered battlefield illusion during their victory at El Alamein in 1942, creating entire phantom armies in the North African desert. Operation Bertram had convinced Field Marshal Erwin Rommel that Montgomery's attack would come from the south when it actually struck from the north, contributing significantly to the Afrika Korps' defeat. Two unlikely partners spearheaded the American adaptation of these tactics. Major Ralph Ingersoll, a flamboyant celebrity journalist who had founded the newspaper PM and previously served as managing editor of The New Yorker, brought creative vision and media savvy. Colonel Billy Harris, a pragmatic career officer from the Army Corps of Engineers, provided military expertise and organizational skill. Ingersoll was the dreamer who asked what if, while Harris was the realist who figured out how to. Their partnership produced a revolutionary concept. Rather than the static deceptions employed by the British, they envisioned a mobile unit capable of mounting elaborate ruses anywhere along the front lines. This traveling roadshow would impersonate different divisions, create phantom armies, and misdirect German intelligence through a coordinated campaign of visual, sonic, and radio deception. The task of assembling this unique force fell to personnel officers who scoured the country for men with specialized talents. At Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, young artists found mysterious notices on bulletin boards seeking volunteers for a camouflage unit. Bernie Bluestein, a 19-year-old art student from Cleveland, recalled decades later that the notice gave no hint of the dangerous game they would play. If I had known we'd be operating right next to the front lines with nothing but rifles while German artillery zeroed in on our positions, I might have reconsidered, he admitted. The recruitment net cast wide, pulling in architects, theatre set designers, sound engineers, and radio operators who could mimic the distinctive fist of other telegraphers. From Bell Laboratories came specialists who had worked on classified projects involving sound recording and amplification. The intelligence quotient of the assembled unit averaged 119, among the highest in the entire Army. The 23rd comprised 4 distinct components. The 603rd Camouflage Engineers, with 379 men, handled visual deception using inflatable equipment. The Signal Company Special employed 296 men in radio deception. The 3,132nd Signal Service Company, with 145 men, operated the sonic deception equipment. The 406th Combat Engineers Special, comprising 168 men led by Captain George Rebb, provided security and construction support. Standing in stark contrast to American innovation was the German intelligence apparatus in early 1944. The Wehrmacht's intelligence services operated in rigid compartments with minimal coordination between the Abwehr and the Sicherheitsdienst. German commanders relied heavily on aerial reconnaissance, radio intercepts, and reports from agents, but they lacked the integrated analysis that might have detected sophisticated deceptions. February 1944 brought intensive training at Camp Forest as the unit developed its deception techniques. The visual deception teams experimented with pneumatic tanks, testing different rubber compounds. Engineers from U.S. Rubber Company in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, worked with local civilians like teenager Teresa Ricard, who earned 49 cents an hour helping produce the 93-pound inflatable tanks that would become the Ghost Army's signature weapons. The inflatable arsenal expanded beyond tanks to include artillery pieces, trucks, jeeps, and even L-5 liaison aircraft. Each piece featured carefully painted details, including unit markings and weathering effects. The artists discovered that imperfect camouflage actually enhanced credibility, deliberately positioning inflatables with partially exposed sections that enemy reconnaissance would interpret as poor camouflage discipline. Meanwhile, at the Army Experimental Station at Pine Camp, New York, the Sonic Deception Unit undertook an unprecedented mission. Lieutenant Colonel Hilton Howell Rayleigh, who commanded the station, oversaw teams that traveled to Fort Knox to record actual armored and infantry units in action. Using state-of-the-art wire recorders, they captured the sounds of tanks, construction, and troop movements. The technical challenge involved not just recording but reproduction. Engineers developed custom amplifiers capable of 500 watts output, paired with speakers mounted in armored half-tracks. The sonic cars could project sound up to 15 miles under ideal conditions. The radio deception teams faced perhaps the most intellectually demanding challenge. Every telegraph operator develops a unique sending style, called a fist, as distinctive as a fingerprint. German intercept operators catalogued these patterns, tracking specific American units by their radio operators' characteristics. The signal company special operators had to learn to perfectly mimic these styles. In May 1944, the Ghost Army crossed the Atlantic, landing in Liverpool before establishing quarters near Stratford-upon-Avon. Here they supported Operation Fortitude, the massive Allied deception plan for D-Day. Working at night, they inflated hundreds of tanks and trucks in southeastern England, creating phantom supply dumps that German reconnaissance would photograph. 2 weeks after D-Day, advance elements crossed the Channel, landing at Omaha Beach. Their first major operation against the enemy, Elephant, commenced from July 1st to 4th, 1944, simulating the 2nd Armored Division's presence while the real unit secretly repositioned. German artillery soon tested the deception's effectiveness, firing on Ghost Army positions and confirming that enemy observers believed they were shooting at real armored vehicles. Operation Brittany in August marked evolution to operational deception. As Patton's Third Army raced across France, the Ghost Army simulated an entire corps threatening German garrisons. For 3 weeks, they created the illusion of 20,000 troops where only their unit existed. Operation Brest, from August 20th to 27th, saw the first coordinated use of all deception techniques. Sonic units operated within 500 yards of German positions, playing recordings of tank movements. Corporal Jack Macy found himself under intense fire, later recalling it as the biggest piece of action I ever saw in World War II. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 found the Ghost Army dangerously close to the German breakthrough. During desperate early days, they executed Operation Kodak, creating phantom reinforcements in blizzard conditions while real combat raged nearby. Tragedy struck repeatedly in 1945. On January 9th, Chester Pelliccioni of the 3,132nd died when a fire detonated a hidden German grenade. On March 12th, Captain Thomas Wells was killed by artillery during Operation Bouzonville. The following day, Staff Sergeant George Peddle died from shrapnel wounds in the same barrage that wounded 15 others. A fourth soldier also gave his life during the Ghost Army's service. March 1945 brought Operation Viersen, the Ghost Army's final and most successful mission. Supporting the Rhine crossing, they simulated 2 divisions preparing to assault, while the actual attack occurred 10 miles south. The deception involved over 200 inflatable vehicles and networks, maintaining radio traffic for 30,000 phantom troops. On the night of March 23rd, German guns pounded the Ghost Army's false positions. When the 30th and 79th Infantry Divisions crossed at the actual assault site, they met minimal resistance. The divisions suffered only about 30 casualties in the initial phase. Normal losses would have exceeded 1,000. Colonel Reeder later stated that Viersen alone justified the creation of the 23rd. The German surrender on May 8, 1945, ended the Ghost Army's mission. They returned to the United States and were deactivated in September at Pine Camp, New York. Orders emphasized absolute secrecy. They were to tell no one about their wartime service. This silence would last until declassification in 1996. Veterans returned to civilian life carrying experiences they couldn't share. Bernie Bluestein became an industrial designer in Cleveland, keeping his secret for over 50 years. Ellsworth Kelly became a giant of American art without discussing his wartime deceptions. Bill Blass built a fashion empire while his biography mentioned only camouflage duty. The psychological impact varied among veterans. Some adjusted easily, while others struggled with the disconnect between their wartime importance and post-war anonymity. They had helped win the war, but couldn't tell anyone how. Marriages strained under unshared secrets. Children asked what Daddy did in the war and received vague answers about engineering work. Professional lives often reflected wartime experiences. Many veterans gravitated toward careers involving creativity and illusion. Advertising agencies employed numerous alumni who understood how perception could be shaped. Dick Syracuse applied his sonic expertise to the emerging television industry, pioneering methods for creating convincing audio environments. In 1985, Smithsonian Magazine published the first public account of the Ghost Army. Full declassification wouldn't come until 1996, 50 years after the war's end. By then, many veterans had died without telling their families the truth about their service. The Ghost Army Legacy Project, founded by filmmaker Rick Beyer, began documenting survivors' stories in the early 2000s. His 2013 PBS documentary brought national attention to the unit. Museums began collecting Ghost Army artifacts, with the National World War II Museum creating a major exhibition. In 2022, Congress awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the Ghost Army. The ceremony on March 21, 2024, saw only 3 of 7 surviving veterans attend. Bernard Bluestein, 100 years old, reflected, "We did what we had to do. I didn't realize what it was all about as a youngster. I'm delighted and pleased by this honor." The medal depicts Ghost Army soldiers in action, typing messages, sewing patches, carrying inflatable tanks, operating speakers. Secretary of the Army Christine Wormuth noted that modern military deception still draws on Ghost Army techniques. The tactical innovations pioneered by the Ghost Army influenced military doctrine for generations. Modern battlefield deception employs electronic warfare and cyber operations, yet fundamental principles remain unchanged. Understand enemy expectations, create convincing false narratives, coordinate multiple channels to achieve surprise. Military historians calculate that the Ghost Army saved between 15,000 and 30,000 American lives through their operations. Each successful deception meant attacks against weakened positions, river crossings with minimal resistance. These weren't abstract numbers, but real soldiers who returned home because German commanders were looking in the wrong direction. The Ghost Army's story challenges traditional narratives of military valor. They were warriors who fought with creativity rather than violence, who measured success in American lives saved rather than enemies killed. Their legacy transcends military history, proving that in war's most serious endeavor, there was room for creativity and unconventional thinking. The 3133rd Signal Service Company conducted parallel sonic deceptions in Italy, demonstrating the concept's versatility across theaters. Educational programs now use the Ghost Army story to teach lessons beyond military history in business, art, and psychology. The ethical dimensions of military deception provoke ongoing debate. The Ghost Army operated in a grey area where capture might mean execution as spies rather than POW treatment. Their courage was different from charging machine gun nests, but no less real. As the last veterans pass away, their story gains historical perspective. They were citizen soldiers who brought civilian skills to military problems, proving that diversity of talent strengthens capability. In an era of technological warfare, their example reminds us that human creativity remains irreplaceable. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops stands unique in military history. No other unit waged war primarily through deception on such a scale. They won battles not through superior firepower, but through superior imagination. Where massive bombing campaigns relied on devastating firepower, the Ghost Army achieved strategic effects through creativity and intellectual superiority. From Camp Forest to the Rhine, through French hedgerows and Luxembourg forests, the Ghost Army performed their unique mission. They were artists who painted with deception, engineers who built with illusion, soldiers who fought with imagination. Today, as military forces study information warfare, the Ghost Army's example seems prophetic. They understood that perception could be as important as reality, that controlling what enemies believed could be more decisive than controlling terrain. The final accounting defies conventional metrics. They fired few shots, captured no territory, won no traditional battles. Yet they saved tens of thousands of American lives. They carried secrets for decades, silent warriors whose greatest victories remained classified for half a century. As dawn broke on May 8, 1945, these artists at war had validated their unconventional approach. They waged war against the enemy's mind and won, proving that on the modern battlefield, imagination could be as powerful as ammunition. The Ghost Army's unofficial motto captured their spirit. Deception was our weapon, illusion our craft, and saving lives our mission. In a conflict that showcased humanity's capacity for destruction, they represented something different. Soldiers who achieved victory through imagination rather than violence. They were phantom warriors who won real victories, proving conclusively that in war, as in life, the mind can be the most powerful weapon of all.